The bistro wasn't anything special. Tiny yellow coffee cups with smiley faces, a decent French onion soup, and bread that left much to be desired for dipping. The tables were rusty, the chairs wobbly, but it was the perfect spot to watch passers-by braving one of the frequent, short April showers that pepper Parisian afternoons. Nothing stood out about the bistro, nothing except for her. Helen. Her arms were covered in tattoos, though her face looked almost too clean, too healthy. Her green eyes matched the color of the coffee cup she sipped from, sitting cross-legged on that rickety chair. She wasn't watching the people or the rain. She was lost in a novel, McEwan's latest, looking radiant. Normally, I don't approach beautiful women in public, but this time I just had to. I haven't read him in a while, I said as I stepped out of the bistro, holding my Americano in a to-go cup. I'm American, after all, and while I'd been in Europe for some time, I could never justify spending good money on a shot of espresso. Is that one any good? Helen looked up, suspicious at first, maybe a bit annoyed like she'd already had her fair share of unwanted advances for the day. But something in her softened, and she answered, "He's brilliant." "Would you think me crude if I said I liked Atonement better as a movie?" I asked, pulling out the chair across from her. That was all it took. We hit it off, Helen and I, talking about everything from the cement garden, McEwan's disturbing debut, to Nutshell, that murder story narrated by a fetus. Of course, she told me I was dead wrong about Atonement. Say what you will about McEwan, but you'll always have something to discuss. Eventually, I casually asked her where she worked. "You'll think it's odd," she said with a light, airy accent. "Stranger than Nutshell?" I joked. "Fair enough," she sighed, leaning forward. "I work in the Catacombs. I guide tours, keep things tidy, hang out with my friends down there." She wiggled her fingers playfully, as if mimicking ghosts. I raised an eyebrow in mock surprise. The Catacombs? I never would have guessed. But the truth was, I already knew. It was the real reason I'd approached Helen that day. I had to talk to her. Let me back up a bit. It might come as a surprise, given my affection for British lit and my apartment near Place de la Bastille, but I was raised in West Virginia. Specifically, the part of the state other West Virginians looked down on. I didn't care much for the place, except for Abden Acres, the family home. Abden Acres started off modest, but over generations, each Abden added their own quirky touches, spare rooms, extensions, annexes, until the place became a sprawling maze. And we grew rich, very rich. Abden men were buried in massive mausoleums out back, the women were buried out in the woods. It was the mausoleum that fascinated and unsettled my friends, but to me, it was just another part of home. Entering it was strictly forbidden, reserved only for the Abden patriarch, my father. Naturally, I snuck in a few times. Nothing special, just dusty old tombs. As I grew older, my interests shifted, and I left it behind. Then my father died, liver disease, something I was on my own path toward, having started drinking young. My mother, bless her, was a wreck. Abden women aren't exactly known for their independence. She cleaned obsessively, even things that didn't need cleaning, and had a strict no-alcohol policy. Any liquor found would be tossed, and you'd earn a sharp slap for bringing it into the house. This was a problem, because after my father's death, I needed a drink more than ever. I was the new man in charge now, the new Abden patriarch. So, I found myself sneaking back into that mausoleum, searching for a place to stash my scotch. My mother would never set foot in there. Safer than sorry, I figured. One night, while hiding a bottle, I noticed something strange. A loose brick in the floor. Curious, I pried it up. Then another. And another. An entire section of the floor seemed to be falling apart. Beneath it, I found a trapdoor and a spiraling staircase of rotting wood. I knew it was dangerous. If I fell, no one would ever find me, but I went down anyway. Halfway down, my flashlight flickered out. Stupid, I hadn't checked the batteries. Still, I pressed on. The steps creaked, and at the bottom, I was greeted by a faint warmth. Not the cold, damp air I had expected from a tomb, but something more, alive. Then I heard it. A voice, a whisper, calling my name. Chills ran down my spine. I wanted to call out to ask who's there, but all I could manage was a meek, "I'm here." Suddenly, a flame burst to life from a torch on the wall, casting the room in a dim glow. The space was smaller than I expected, not much larger than a closet. A single stone coffin sat in the center, intricate carvings covering its surface, children running, fear etched into their faces, a woman cutting a man's throat, a man devouring a baby. Horrors, all etched with Renaissance-level craftsmanship. My hands, scraped and bleeding, smeared blood across the carvings as I traced them. And again, the voice called my name, deeper this time, coming from within the tomb. I looked down. Adam Abden, it read. Born 1642. The first of us. Things between us progressed quickly after that first meeting at the bistro. Normally, I'm someone who needs space, but I had a goal in mind, and I needed to move fast. I picked my moment carefully. It was a Saturday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the window of my apartment, the curtain gently flapping in the breeze. Helen and I were lying there, naked under the sheets, catching our breath. "So, when are you going to take me to meet your friends?" I asked. "My friends," she said, her charming accent almost lost in the noise floating in from outside. "Yeah," I said. "In the catacombs." She paused for a moment. "Oh, wait, you've never been down there before, have you?" "I thought you had." "No," I said, "but I'm dying to go." "Really?" Helen asked, sitting up on her elbow, eyeing me curiously. "Well, now I'm dying to show you." I playfully pulled her elbow, flipping myself back on top of her, getting ready for round two. "But not when it's open," I whispered, kissing down her neck, her collarbone. "I want you to sneak me in." She giggled, squirming in my arms, called me bad, and slapped my shoulder lightly. Then she said maybe we shouldn't sneak in. Why not just stop by during her shift? She could give me a private tour, but she could get in trouble, maybe even fired. "They're not going to fire a model employee like you," I teased. "And if they do, I'll just whisk you away to my family home in West Virginia, where I'll take care of your every need, and you can raise the 13 strong children we'll have." She laughed at that, mostly surprised by my use of the word boyfriend. Apparently, that's when it became official for her. I thought it already was, but maybe that's just a cultural thing. 3 nights later, well past midnight, we snuck away from the building and across the empty street. Helen used her key card to get us inside. We passed the booth where they handed out headphones for audio tours and slipped through the security gates. "Want to check my pockets?" I asked as we walked through the detectors. "You can reach as deep as you like." "Don't be gross," she laughed, but I could tell she was enjoying herself. I had the sense she wasn't normally the bold type, and sneaking me in was giving her a genuine thrill. I'm glad she was happy in those last moments. Soon, we reached a staircase, winding concrete steps, railings painted white, leading down into the pit. I looked down into the darkness. "Lead the way," I said, fingers brushing against the vial in my pocket. In his writings, Adam Abden imagined hell as a void, no pools of fire, no rivers of sulfur, no demons torturing the damned. Just nothingness. As far as I know, I was the first to find his works, 4 books bound in decaying leather, buried with him. Many nights, I ventured into the mausoleum with a bottle of Johnny Walker to read the great man's words. Sometimes I'd peer into his stone coffin, staring into the sockets where his eyes once were, wondering if he was staring back at me. The books appeared historical, but Adam was a philosopher. His writings rivaled the greats. Some kids grow up reading Crime and Punishment or, God forbid, David Foster Wallace. I had my great-great-great-grandfather, and his words left a deep impression. 200 years before Darwin, Adam speculated that we descended from apes. He forced his wife, and later his daughter, to wash their hands in a chemical solvent of his own design before preparing food. He predicted flying machines, long-range communication devices, and a global economy. But his most remarkable achievements were in the realm of the occult. When I first came across these strange topics in his writings, I dismissed them as the eccentric hobbies of an otherwise brilliant mind. After all, even Newton wasted countless hours on alchemy. But then I stumbled upon a page titled Restoration of Spirits. I almost skimmed past it until the illustration caught my eye. It was a potion, or a spell, if you will. It showed how to take an almost empty bottle of alcohol, the almost was key, and make it full again. I glanced at the bottle of Johnny Walker beside me, almost empty, as fate or luck would have it. And it had been a long day. A restoration of spirits was just what the doctor ordered. With a mix of excitement and embarrassment, I set off to gather the ingredients. Vinegar, the blood of a raccoon or mink. I found a raccoon first. Opium, thanks to my mother's doctor, who never asked too many questions about her frequent Vicodin refills, and, of course, the scotch. I needed exactly 100 drops of the remaining liquor. It took time to gather everything. Just before dawn, I mixed in the vinegar, the blood of the poor raccoon still lying broken somewhere in the woods, and the 5 Vicodin. My mother wouldn't miss it. I placed my hand over the bottle's neck. The instructions were very clear. My right hand had to completely cover the opening, then I shook it while reciting a Latin phrase 3 times. That's when I nearly dropped the bottle, startled by how much heavier it had suddenly become. I looked inside, and to my shock, the bottle was full again. I sniffed. It smelled like Johnny Walker, or at least I hoped it was. Who knows where that raccoon had been? I took a sip. Yep, Johnny Walker Black, just as it should be. Good Lord. No, I thought. Good Adam. Since that moment, I've never paid for another drop. Helen and I descended the spiraling staircase, all 130 steps, heading 5 stories underground in the dead of night, just to fulfill Adam's final request. Oh, deliver my bones closer to hell, he had said. I fingered the vial of powdered Adam Abden in my pocket. That part had been easy. 200-year-old skeletons aren't exactly tough. Getting it through airport security had been the tricky part. I was fully prepared to claim the vial contained drugs, but luckily, they didn't check it. They spent most of their time searching an old Mexican lady while I slipped through without issue. When we reached the bottom, Helen led us through a pitch-black stone tunnel, using only her phone's flashlight to guide us. I crouched slightly as we walked. The ceiling was low, barely above my head, and the walls were so close I could touch both sides at once. The ground was uneven, and the walk felt endless. Definitely not your typical tourist spot. Finally, we reached an open chamber. Signs, both in English and French, explained the history of the catacombs, detailing how over 6 million people found their final resting place in these underground tunnels. They also asked visitors not to disturb the remains. Centuries ago, the people of Paris realized their burial practices were becoming a public health crisis. Old coffins started crashing through the basement walls of houses built near ancient graveyards. As fate would have it, those same houses had been constructed over tunnels dug deep into the bedrock beneath the city. So, in the dead of many nights, city and church officials emptied the cemeteries, stacking bones floor to ceiling along the tunnel walls, mile after mile, 6 million souls. A mass grave, just as Adam had requested. Helen showed me around the passageways, where loose bones were scattered among the piles. A row of tibias might be interrupted by a line of skulls. Someone's leg bone might be far from where their head rested. The thought saddened me in a strange way. Unity, that was Adam's guiding philosophy. Unity of body, of mind, of nation. Death was an affront to Adam because it shattered the unity of blood and spirit. And that's where I came in. As our conversation faded, I pulled out Helen's water bottle. You know what would make this more fun? I asked, taking out the vial of pale powder. You can't be serious, she said, watching as I dumped the powder inside. I screwed the cap back on and shook it with a grin. What's wrong? I teased. Never gotten high in a room full of dead people before? I pressed the bottle to my lips and pretended to drink. It had to hit her first, before me, that was key. I handed her the bottle. You're serious? She asked. It won't last long, I assured her. Come on, it'll be fun. She shrugged, then took a bigger swig than I expected. Ugh, she said, wiping her mouth. That tastes awful. You'll forget the taste soon, I said. Let's sit and wait for it. We found a sturdy pile of femurs to sit on. I ran my fingers over the damp stone floor. Give me a bit more, I said, reaching for the bottle. You drank more than me. This time, I drank, an act of faith as bold as any taken by Moses or Peter. Helen and I intertwined our fingers, waiting. After a while, she spoke. I feel weird. You should, I said, watching her. She coughed, blood beginning to trickle from her nose. What's happening? She managed to say, coughing more violently now. Blood sprayed from her mouth and nose. She clutched her stomach, fingers clawing as if trying to hold onto something. Then, she collapsed onto her hands and knees, blood dripping as she gasped for air. It'll be over soon, I whispered, murmuring other words, secret words from Adam's book. Before long, I felt the pain rise in my own belly, blood seeping from my nostrils. Helen was convulsing on the stone floor, her body twisted, frothing at the mouth. She was still when I started coughing, but everything was happening too fast. I was coughing too hard to finish the spell. Something deep inside me forced me onto my hands and knees, just as Helen had been. I gasped out the final words, feeling the tearing in my gut, blood splattering onto the columns of femurs. My brain felt like it was boiling, blistering, leaking. How could I have done this to sweet Helen? This was agony beyond imagining. And then, it stopped. I don't know if Adam had somehow spared me, or if my brain's pain receptors had simply burned out. I barely had the strength to utter the final words before I died. Everything fell silent. The tunnels were still once more. Our bodies lay there, crumpled heaps beside each other. The authorities would find us, inspect our stomachs, our vomit, and they'd discover a mix of cyanide and old bones. Lover's folly, they'd call it, and quietly clean it up. The public wouldn't be told how this sacred place had been desecrated. And then, the bones on the walls began to tremble, softly at first, but steadily, as some ancient power rose from the depths. From beneath a mass of bones, Adam Abden's body emerged, whole once more. Thou hast done well, a voice echoed in my mind as we crawled out from under the pile of bones and stood, dust and femurs clattering at our feet. Thank you, Adam, I thought in response. We stretched our limbs, he for the first time in centuries. Silently, we stripped the clothes from my old body, lying bloody and still. Adam had been, and now was again, exactly my size. He gazed down at the bodies for a moment, at Helen's wide, vacant eyes staring at the pile of bones, both of us grateful for the sacrifice she had made possible. I wasn't sure what to expect, but sharing a mind was easier, natural, even. I reeled through centuries of memories I had never lived, a miracle in itself. At last, Adam raised our eyes and turned our head toward the exit. Let us depart, he said, and together we began the ascent into the bright Parisian night.